Hotel history is created for adult audiences. Content may not be suitable for all listeners. Discretion is advised. You're listening to Hotel History. We take you with us through the sordid history and scandals of some of the world's most famous and infamous hotels. I'm Dieta.
And I'm Yael. Let's get started.
Today we're talking about the Savoy Hotel in London. It has witnessed over a century of London's history.
We'll talk about its connection to the arts, hosting celebrities, writers, and musicians, and how it played a role in shaping London's cultural scene.
So let's start with where exactly the Savoy Hotel is, because if you're like me and have never been to London, then you don't know anything about the geography there. So it is actually on the Thames, which is the gigantic river that runs through the center of London, in the city of Westminster on the Strand, which is a major thoroughfare that runs through this West End part of London. And you may have heard of the West End because that's where all of the theater happens in London.
Also, if you Google Savoy Hotel, a bajillion Savoy hotels will pop up.
Yes.
So be careful. You have to specifically write the Savoy Hotel in London, because a lot of people use that name.
Yeah, and I think a lot of them just named their stuff after this hotel because it's such an icon.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay. It's been around for a really long time. A lot of people might have heard of it, but we're going to go deep into its origins.
Deep into the history of where even the name Savoy comes from.
Reading about this, I started to realize how old England is.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm stupid. I know it was old, but I'm like, damn, that's like...
Yeah. Because, well, we've done all American hotels, so we're like, this one's 100 years old.
But the fact that a place could exist... Like, really, if you think about it, what was happening in America in 1500?
Conquest. Nothing good. So
that's why it was so interesting to read that the Savoy Hotel, the property it's on, had a very long, interesting history.
So in 1246, so just think about that, how long ago that was. That's insane. King Henry III granted the land between the Strand and the Thames, on which a palace was soon to be built, to the uncle of Queen Eleanor, who was Peter, the Count of Savoy. So this place,
that's where the name came
from. So this place has been called Savoy for basically 1,000 years.
Wow.
Yes. So the house that they built there became the home of the Earl of Lancaster and then his descendants. So they lived there throughout the next century. And then in the 14th century, the Strand was paved as far as the Savoy. And so remember, the Strand is that major thoroughfare. And then that's when it became a huge riverside palace of John of Gaunt. So he was the nation's power broker at this time, the richest man in the kingdom after the king. So he was a big deal. And then so the Savoy was considered like the most magnificent house in England.
Okay, so that area has been around, known to be pretty fancy for a while.
Yeah. And even Geoffrey Chaucer began writing the Canterbury Tales while working at the Savoy Palace as a clerk.
Oh,
so
I did. Okay.
It has some deep history.
Oh, wow.
But unfortunately, that palace is no longer there because during the Peasants' Revolt that happened in 1381, the rioters blamed John of Gaunt for introducing the poll tax. Man, it's always taxes that get we peasants stirred up.
We're due for revolt in this country.
Yeah, so they basically demolished the palace and everything in it. They threw everything into the river. So thanks for polluting it, but also
imagine what's in that river.
Uprising. Yeah.
After the revolt, it turned into an hospital by Henry VII, and it stayed that way for about 200 years. Then in the 18th century, it turns into a barracks. The hospital complex remained in use as barracks and a military prison for most of the 18th century. And in 1776, much of the structure was destroyed in a fire. Do you think it was the Americans? At the time, it housed a military infirmary, a prison, recruiting state, everything. It had everything. In the early 1800s, almost all of the remaining hospital buildings were demolished to make way for the approached road to the new Waterloo Bridge, and the property became a garbage dump.
Yeah, so whenever we are on the scene for the Savoy Hotel to be built, it's just basically a gigantic trash pile. So it's really impressive that the builder of the Savoy had this vision and could see past.
Well, it makes sense because if he knew about the history, he knew that at one point it was a palace and, that's where the noblemen lived. Why not?
Yeah.
Return it to its former glory. But I feel like he had the man who started the Savoy Hotel had like a natural instinct for these things. He saw the potential in a lot of different properties.
Yes, he definitely had vision.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that man's name is Richard D'Oyly Carte. He was born May 3rd, 1844 on Greek Street in Soho, which is only about a 10-minute walk from the Savoy estate. His father was an impoverished flute player, and his mother was the daughter of a vicar. Her father did not consent to their marriage, so they eloped. And basically they lived in a little bit of a rough and tumble neighborhood at the start of their marriage. Their house was surrounded by a homeless shelter, pubs, a whorehouse, and the Royal Theater. So he really kind of grew up in his childhood in a really interesting place where all kinds of people lived. But his father did become a partner in a music instrument manufacturing business eventually, which allowed them to make more money and move out to some nicer places, a better neighborhood. And so D'Oyly was able to get like a really good education in music, languages, all of that kind of stuff. His family saw that he had a talent for music and theater and really tried to help as much as they could.
Yeah, they definitely embraced his creative side.
Yeah. Which helps if you have a musician for a parent.
I mean, they sound like they didn't listen to the rules. They eloped, music
yeah, they were definitely
life.
Had some individuality going on.
They lived next to a whorehouse. I mean, they're cool people.
D'Oyly joins his father's company, but he spends his free time performing amateur plays and composing operettas. That's what he really wanted to do, was basically be a composer. During this time, he became a fan of fellow composer Arthur Sullivan, who he invites to his opera. Sullivan sends back a note declining because he was out of town, but this is not the last that we will see of Arthur Sullivan.
Yeah, D'Oyly really is
he was
persistent.
A pusher. He reminds me of you. He was like, oh, I see somebody. I'm gonna get him.
I'm actually flattered because this man was really successful.
He really is.
And so I guess being a pusher is a good thing.
Yeah, no, it's a good thing. They see something and they're like, they don't let go of it because they see the value.
Okay. Yeah, but I think also to see if a person's going to respond eventually, to look at all the angles. He knew if there was an opening, he just had to push a little bit more.
Exactly.
It didn't sound, well, maybe there was some people that he really had to, but yeah. Okay. I'm flattered. Thank you. So he stages another opera, but doesn't have that much success in it. So he sets up an office in the back of his father's shop as a talent agent, and the business slowly grows and he moves into his own office space. And meanwhile, his aunt arranges for him to be married to 17-year-old Blanche Prowse.
Yeah.
Is that how you say her last name?
Sounds good.
Whom he met 4 years earlier when they acted together in an amateur play. They had 2 children, Lucas and Rupert.
Just can't imagine being 13 years old and meeting a guy in his 20s, and then a few years later, it's like, that's your husband now.
Okay, so I kind of could. Because did you ever have a crush when you were 13 with a older guy? Like not old, like but
No,
a teenage.
Okay,
late
like maybe
teenage.
a celebrity. Yeah, I feel like 2021 would have probably been the oldest I would have.
When I was 11, I had a crush on a 16-year-old, on a 17-year-old, or whatever. So like, if you're telling me a 13-year-old meets, okay, he's what, 20 at the time?
22 or 23, because he was 9 years older than her.
Oh, but that's when they got married, when he was 24. No.
No, a few years have passed. It takes him a few years to.
Okay, whatever. Yeah. Anyways, if you're 13, you're like, he's cute. And then a couple of years, you're like, I'm ready. But yes, it is creepy. But I can see how I doubt that's what happened, but I can see how some girls.
I specifically remember being 17 or around 17 and finding out like the different ages of the members of like Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, and like I want to say it was AJ that was like 27, and I was like, ew, he's too old. And I was like, but Justin Timberlake's only 18, so he's the cute one.
That's actually very healthy of you. You don't have major daddy issues. That's
so
a good sign. It'd be weird if you were like 27.
Okay. Give me some of that.
Yeah. Sign me up, Zaddy. Or whatever people say. Yeah. That's like an old man, right? That's not even like
not even a 27-year-old. But to a 17-year-old, that's too old. Anyway, so around this time, he goes to see a 2-act burlesque named Thespis. Arthur Sullivan from before had written the score for it, and a journalist named W.S. Gilbert had written the lyrics. It did not do well. The audiences didn't like it. The critics didn't like it. But D'Oyly saw something special in it. So he commissioned them to write a production for him and rented out an opera theater to put it on. Unfortunately, he ran out of money and had to abandon it, but he tried again as soon as he could when he was invited to manage a theater. What D'Oyly, like his vision, he really wanted to bring quality light opera to London, something that would appeal to the rising middle class. Like he didn't want it to be too highbrow, like too over anybody's head, but he also wanted there to be quality fare that wasn't just pantomime and burlesque and things like that. And he really felt like this partnership of Gilbert and Sullivan was the team that could do it. So he had them write a 1-act warm-up play before the main play that was being shown at the time, called Trial by Jury. And it actually was a hit. It was a bigger hit than the headlining play. And so this is when he really starts to get off the ground and was like, okay, now we have something.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool because he sounds like a pretty revolutionary kind of man who sees something, wants it done, and makes it happen. D'Oyly gets Gilbert and Sullivan. He's gonna make them make amazing plays, but their personal relationships are pretty interesting. So he becomes really good friends with Sullivan because Sullivan, he comes from a poor Irish family, and he basically liked to party. Like to summarize, and D'Oyly was like, "I'm down." They were kind of like plays. Well, I don't know if D'Oyly cheated or anything, but Sullivan definitely was a ladies' man.
Yeah, he definitely loved his attention from the ladies. They loved drinking, they loved feasting, they loved traveling.
He spent a lot of his money. Yeah, usually
like as fast as they could make it, he spent it.
Yeah, he played, cards, and he drank a lot, and gambling and all that stuff. There were definitely specific personalities in this group, and you can see who got along and who didn't. And I think D'Oyly was like a good balance of like, I'm the responsible one, I'm gonna get things done, but I know how to party, but I also know my limits. And then Gilbert was totally different. He was from an upper middle class family of surgeons, and he had a wife, and he didn't want to go and party and drink, and he sounded
kind of dull.
Well, not dull compared to them. He sounded anal.
Yeah.
It wasn't just dull.
Like a homebody.
Well, if that was the case, then I don't think they would have had as many fights. He sounded like he wanted things a certain way, and he very much had disagreements with them. And it was like, and he wasn't going to be as close to D'Oyly or Sullivan because he didn't really engage in their habits and
Yeah. Yeah. And
hobbies.
just, I mean, think about the differences in personality between musicians and lawyers. It's definitely some different lifestyles and
I don't know. It depends on the lawyer.
yeah.
It really depends.
That's fair.
And depends at what part of their career too. But this is the team basically, and over the next few years, they have a lot of successful plays, and they start their own production company, schedule tours all over America. Basically, this is the start of D'Oyly really traveling and experiencing all different hotels, cities, leisure, restaurants. Just he kind of has the bug, like the travel bug. And the more you telling me I'm like him, I'm like, okay, I get it. I kind of like that.
Well, and like, so he's traveling all over Europe, all over America, and he's seeing the nightlife that all of these other places have. And he's really starting to see a gaping void missing in London.
Yeah, it basically inspires him.
Mm-hmm.
So he comes back and he wants to build a near the Savoy. And he calls it the Savoy Theater, right?
So he builds it on part of that estate that had been where the palace was. He builds the Savoy Theater.
Yeah, that opens in 1881, just to let you know where we are in history right now. He also, it's the building, it's the first public building in the world to be lit solely on electricity.
Which, was a huge deal back then. Like, the audience was actually a little terrified when he kind of had a whole spectacle and lit up the theater with incandescent bulbs. And up till that point, like, gas lights would catch on fire all the time, and that's why London kept like burning down and stuff. And so everybody was kind of freaked out that there were so many lights on at one time. But whenever he like showed them that they couldn't catch fire, basically everybody was just entranced. He was really ahead of his time. And he actually beat Thomas Edison to making like a display of what electric lights looked like. Like, Edison, I think, had his demonstration 2 weeks after.
Really?
D'Oyly gave his demonstration of the light bulbs in his theater. So, like, he really was ahead of his time before the people with the patents even.
Yeah, he seemed to be like almost impatient. Mm-hmm. With his, like, what he wanted to get done.
D'Oyly actually had to build his own power station in a shed beside the theater to power all of these lights. And he did it with steam engines. And it was before power plants existed. Like, this was like the first thing of its kind. He actually his engineers were kind of flummoxed for a really long time about how to even pull it all off to light this whole theater. And they basically had to figure it out and get it done. So he was...
That's really cool.
Yeah, just amazing.
So, but after the Savoy Theater and traveling so much, he's like, wait, I should make a hotel, a luxury hotel. People are going to want to come to London, experience this place where the rich and famous and all these amenities will exist, and there's going to be delicious food. And so he opens the Savoy Hotel on August 6th, 1889. It was designed by architect Thomas Edward Culcott, who designed several important buildings in London in the Victoria era, including the Palace Theatre. So a little bit about the Savoy Hotel. It was the first of its kind in London.
Yes.
Before that, it kind of like the fancy hotels weren't that great. They didn't have electricity. They didn't have indoor plumbing. The food was not good and could make you sick.
Yeah, and there was no, like, when we think of nightlife and entertainment and going out to restaurants and things like that now, like, that really didn't exist in London. Most of the restaurants were subpar. I mean, there was entertainment in the form of going to the theaters, but there wasn't the nightlife of like going out and being seen in public anywhere besides these theaters. So he knew that a hotel could be a place to make that happen. And London was bigger than all of the other major metropolises. Like, it was bigger than New York, it was bigger than Paris, but it did not have the hospitality industry to match.
I wonder why. But until him.
Yeah, until him.
He changed the game.
Yeah. So London had two big hotels at the time that were established, the Langham and Westminster Palace, but both lackluster, disgusting food. So a big part of the hotel is that he wanted it to have a world-class restaurant that would focus on French cuisine, which has long been considered one of the best. But he also wanted to bring in food from Russia, some German dishes, Indian dishes, because he knew that he was going to have international guests and he wanted to appeal to their tastes as well. And I guess at the time, turtles were really
turtle soup
important for Americans, and green corn, because he brought those in specifically for American travelers.
He really liked America, and he was really inspired by America, especially the hospitality. And I never thought we were so amazing back in the day.
Back in the day, I guess
we were doing something right. He really liked turtle soup. So he's getting inspiration from everywhere, and he really makes it his mission to get a French chef, or a chef that's not British. No shade to the British food, but he kind of was like, we need to make this good and interesting. So he goes around different hotels, different restaurants, and he poaches the workers there. He's like, oh, you're really good. You want a job that pays a lot more in a really cool hotel? Like, I don't know what he said to some of them.
Yeah, he did not hesitate to offer way more money than what people were already making. Like, he knew the way to a person's heart. So another thing that was really important to D'Oyly was that he knew that these, especially the nouveau riche in this era, had this need to give evidence of their wealth. They wanted to show off their wealth and their power. So he's hoping that a luxury hotel is going to give them a social place to basically come and look at each other and see like who's wearing what and who's doing what. Because normally the rich would only socialize at each other's homes. Like, maybe they would go out to the opera, but there aren't any good restaurants. There aren't any good places to go. So mostly they would just have dances and dinners at their own homes, either in London or out in the country. So for him to actually create a nightlife and get them to come out was a really big deal.
And he also made it a point that women could feel comfortable and socialize there, because they weren't allowed to in a lot of places.
Yes, so he was the first place to allow unchaperoned women to come into the restaurant and eat and have dinners or tea together and be social. They had screens that they had available to put up around the tables in case the women like wanted to have a little bit more privacy, but that didn't last very long, and soon it was just like normal.
If you realize there's like a common theme with hotels and breaking
social norms.
Yeah, social norms and boundaries, like especially with women and people of color and all this stuff, and just testing out new things and experimenting. And he was on the forefront. He's just like, let's do this. Like, he didn't care. He didn't seem super opinionated about politics that much. He just wanted to make this hotel and have a good time and eat good food. And so the Savoy Hotel was the first hotel to use all electric lighting. And it was also the first in England to use elevators imported from America, which he called ascending rooms. And I think
lift is a lot easier to say.
Ascending rooms is really cute, though. Yeah. I'm going in an ascending room right now.
It sounds like it's ethereal, almost like you're going towards heaven. The elevators were really important because before, the top floors of hotels were usually where the employees stayed, because the more stairs you have to go up, the less valuable the room. But now with elevators, the top floors could actually be the more valuable rooms because they have the best views. And since the hotel is situated on the riverside, they have amazing views. If you go to the Savoy's website, you can actually see the view from some of the rooms. It's gorgeous. So the elevator really helped make that possible.
Yeah, it changed the game.
Yeah.
A lot.
He also really upped the bathroom game.
Oh, this
in
is so
hotels. I love this. He
interesting.
had 400 guest rooms and 67 bathrooms. So to us, we're like, wait, what? That doesn't add up. But at the time, to compare, the Victoria Hotel had 4 bathrooms for 500 guests, and this was considered completely normal. Like the builder that D'Oyly hired to do this was shocked at this number of bathrooms and asked if the guests were going to be amphibious.
Oh my God.
Yeah, everyone was so confused by this number of bathrooms.
It's still not a lot of bathrooms. 67. Who had the bathrooms? Were they public bathrooms?
Yeah,
like
well, a
shared
lot
bathrooms?
of the rooms were they were multi-room suites, and so they probably shared a bathroom, I bet, for a lot of the
okay.
rooms.
Are they going to be amphibious? That's cute.
Yeah, and the bathrooms had tubs, fitted in just like our bathrooms do now, and that back then was not normal. Normally they would bring in a portable tub that would be filled with hot water, and then it would be taken away again once you were done. So the fact that you could just go into a room and have a bath that didn't leave was...
Well, they had plumbing, right?
Yes, and they had plumbing. They had hot and cold water on tap.
Oh, like today.
Yeah. Yeah. So
if you're
it
lucky,
was amazing.
your hot water's working.
Like D'Oyly, they said that he went all around to the different showrooms, getting into the tubs and trying to figure out what the best tub was himself.
My God.
Yeah.
That actually sounds like a lot of fun. Tub shopping.
It does.
I would do that. And the tubs must have been really cool looking and small.
Yes.
But very innovative. He was a cool guy. So far. D'Oyly goes around poaching workers from all different places, and he wants to get the best hotel manager there is. So D'Oyly wants to get Caesar Ritz, who manages the Grand Hotel in Monte Carlo, as his hotel manager, and he was... basically, he went there. He was enamored with the Grand Hotel when he visited in 1887 and became fixated on poaching Ritz for the Savoy. Then he ran into Ritz again in 1888 in Baden-Baden. I'm not saying that right.
Baden-Baden.
Baden-Baden. I read things weird.
It's in Germany. I think it's a coastal German place, or on a river or something. It was like a place where all the rich people went. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So he offers him a job there. Claiming his hotel was going to change London, and eventually Ritz came to the hotel's opening as a guest and was so impressed that he agreed to work there in April 1890. After D'Oyly told him he could assemble his team as he saw fit, and he gave him a very generous salary. So
yeah. So next up, D'Oyly really wanted this chef, and he knew that once he had Ritz, that was the way to get this chef, whose name was Auguste Escoffier. French. Yeah, we're gonna say a lot of names with bad French accents.
Escargot. Just call him that.
So Escoffier worked with Ritz in Monte Carlo, and D'Oyly insisted that Ritz bring him along, that he had to be part of the deal. He was considered the best chef in the world and was actually known as the king of chefs and the chef of kings. So one of the reasons that D'Oyly wanted him, not only because he would elevate the Savoy restaurant to top tier level, but also because he is the chef of kings. He was a favorite chef of the Prince of Wales and his inner circle, because the Prince of Wales was kind of a foodie. And D'Oyly really, really wanted the Prince of Wales to be a guest at the Savoy. That was the type of clientele he was trying to get. And so he basically bought Ritz to get to Escoffier to get to the Prince of Wales.
He knew what he was doing. He was like, I follow the trail of wealth.
Yes.
He had a vision and he went for it. And yes, this guy, the Ritz guy, is the same guy that makes the Ritz Hotel later. But that's a different story, if anyone's wondering. And the chef, he had some interesting dishes. but to call the Prince of Wales a foodie, as much as you can be a foodie during that time, because food was weird.
Anyone who is excited to eat frog legs in a champagne jelly,
yeah. A lot of the food they described, I'm like, good.
It doesn't sound great to modern ears, but you don't knock it till you've tried it.
I'm never gonna try soup.
Turtle soup. No.
Yeah.
No.
They really liked reptiles back then. Yeah, and the chef Escafor. Am I saying this right? Escafor.
I think it's Escoffier.
Escoffier.
But I don't know. I don't speak French. I don't
know
parlez-vous the Francais.
I am so bad with French accents. As you know, I dated someone who had a French name, and I could not say his name for the life of me.
No. He was just always like, that's not my name. He
hated it. He's like, you're not saying my name right. I'm like, I'm sorry. I
don't know what you want from me.
Like, my name's not that easy either. So I understand. But, so it's Escoffier?
Sure.
Okay.
I think that sounds the most right from the spelling.
Yeah. So he was a weirdo, right? He was like really intense.
He had a military background and he brought it into the kitchen. So he basically invents the way that restaurant kitchens are run to this day. This was him. So he has this kitchen setup known as the Kitchen Brigade, and it's the setup that we have now where different chefs do different parts of the process. So whereas before, one chef would do every single step of a dish. And so like if you ordered an omelet, it might take that chef 15 minutes to make your dish. But when you have all the different people doing the different steps of the prep along the way, it made it only 5-minute wait. So he believed that your food should get to you quickly and still warm. And that was revolutionary for the time.
It's really the start of the new century.
Yeah. And he also did not allow his cooks to drink or smoke while they were working in the kitchen, which was...
But outside the kitchen.
Yeah, like outside on your break, fine. But before, like, during that time, it was very normal for everybody to just be smoking and drinking while they cooked.
That's weird. I know
might be why the food was not so great.
I mean... the sanitary standards back then were not that great. So the thing is, his motivation was very different than ours. Like ours is like, that's gross. And
and his was like, this is inefficient.
He's like, you're ruining my food. Like, I'm the best. Those frog legs cannot smell like cigarette smoke. So the restaurant basically is very successful. And in the hotel, there's a lot of different like restaurants and bars. So there's like a grill for more casual food fare, and then the main restaurant for evening dinners, and then they also have the American bar, and that opens in 1893 and is the longest running cocktail bar in the world. So of course, since the hotel is so fancy, it's going to attract really fancy famous personalities. And back in the day, that included all the power for like politicians, actors, painters, but they weren't really actresses back then. They didn't have celebrity. No. Yeah. Oh, Sarah Bernhardt was like, she's like the first famous
they're
actress.
Actors. Well, actresses and like opera singers, basically. They were like the actresses of the...
Right. But they were... Most actresses and theater was looked down upon until maybe now it started to change. But Sarah Bernhardt, I'm pretty sure, is like the first what they call celebrity.
Yeah.
Because she was so well known and she traveled everywhere. And she has a crazy story. Did you read it?
No, I haven't gotten there yet.
Oh my God. This woman. She basically worked up until like her final days. And she traveled everywhere, and she had multiple affairs with several different people. Like, it was nonstop. When she was old, she was dating guys like 37 years younger than her. It's not the first time.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's not like a one-off thing. It's like over and over she'll be having affairs. People are like in love with her. She was very charismatic. And even in reviews, they would say she was great. But they were like, this is not a beautiful woman. But whatever, she's so mesmerizing.
Yeah,
she had it. And She was really, really interesting. You should read her bio. I want to read a real biography about her because she sounded fascinating. And then there was Claude Monet. Is it Monet or Monet?
Monet. Yeah.
Monet.
Monet is with the A. Yeah. This one is Monet.
Okay. So he hung out there, right?
Yeah. He painted several of the view of his room is several of his paintings. Like out of his window, he could see like is it Charing Cross or Charing Cross? We don't know how to pronounce any of these things because I didn't listen to the audiobook this time.
American
I'm so sorry. Charing Cross Station, I'm going to guess, was his view. And he actually loved how foggy London was. He thought that made it a more appealing place to look at. And so he would like paint the foggy view and like the train station with its smoke and steam and everything. And I think that D'Oyly actually purchased some of the paintings that he made of the view.
Oh, this smart man. I was saying D'Oyly. He knew what he was doing. And who else? Oh, Winston Churchill and his mother, Lady Randolph Churchill. And that's another character. So if you think Winston Churchill is interesting, he gets it from someone.
Yeah.
His mom, again, another player.
Got it from his mama.
No, the second one. So Victorian women, I don't think get enough credit. You know, we just think they're one way. And I think that society wanted them to be a certain way. But fascinating women.
They did not all stick to that.
No. So Lady Randolph Churchill also had a pretty interesting life.
Yeah. First of all, American.
Oh, yeah. She was American.
Yeah. She was born in Brooklyn.
Yeah,
her name was Jenny Jerome. Was that
yeah,
it?
Jenny Jerome.
Yeah.
Of course, she's from Brooklyn. That's why I relate. So, yeah. And then she marries Winston Churchill's father, who she has 2 kids. And the parentage of those children are questioned a lot. Ooh. But then everyone's like, no, they look like him. And so basically they believe that those were his children, but she had a lot of affairs, and same situation as Sarah Bernhardt. She was a lot older and she had a lot of younger men after her, I believe. From what I read, I think there was some situation like that. Oh, yeah. Even her third husband was younger than Winston Churchill at the time.
Oh, my God. Well, yeah. I also love that. So I believe it was her father's mistress was like a well-to-do society lady named Mrs. Ronalds. And she became like BFFs with her father's mistress, and they would hang out together. And I'm like, well, that's where she learned it.
Yeah, of course. It makes total sense. Now you understand. But she was so like wanted and charismatic, and people fawned over her. And I told you, I looked at a picture of her. She wasn't a bad looking lady, but like, my God, the way that people would talk about her. So she had a very, I'm assuming, charismatic personality like Winston Churchill, and was really witty and clever, because he got that from someone, and I'm assuming it was her. Next person, Puccini. Who is Puccini?
I think he was an opera star.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Now I remember. And Gucci was a part of this club too.
Oh.
But he was the, that comes later. He did like the luggage or something, and then now there's like a Gucci.
Oh yeah,
room.
now there's a Gucci suite.
Yeah, and there's some other important people that stayed at the hotel: the Vanderbilts, because they stayed everywhere; the Roosevelts, George Bernard Shaw, Emile Zola. Who is that?
So he was a novelist, and he was really famous. He's from France. He actually was involved later in publishing basically a critique of how the government was handling the Dreyfus affair that happened.
Oh, that's him.
Yeah, and so he had to flee Paris to not get arrested for that. And yeah, and so this was before all of that happened, and so he was he came to the hotel while he and his wife were there to observe the poor and needy in London, which I guess they were doing from afar since they were staying at the Savoy. But like the next time he came to London, he was one of the poor and needy because he didn't have time to grab anything before he fled. He came like with his pajamas wrapped in newspaper, like in nothing else.
Damn. Well, I hope he wasn't judging them too harsh then.
No, and eventually, like sometime in the 20th century, I believe, like the Catholic Church and a bunch of other like people officially apologized to his memory, I guess, for
it was memory.
Yeah,
so
because I think he was already dead by then. But yeah, for causing him all of that problem when he was standing up for something that was so clearly wrong.
Didn't they eventually have to apologize to the Dreyfus family?
Yeah.
I remember learning about it, and then I read a lot more into it when I was watching this documentary, and so it's actually really horrible. But man, just critiquing, and he wasn't Jewish, right?
No, he just saw the injustice and was like, guys, what, like, this is so, like, you're inept and anti-Semitic and everybody knows it.
Okay, other person, Nellie Melba. I love that name, Nellie, for a girl. I think that's cute.
It is really cute. She was an opera singer, a really famous one at the time.
Okay, and I have a feeling the chef had a crush on her because he made a lot of food for her and he named a lot of dishes after her.
That was his. I meant to put more in here, but that was like his thing. Anytime they had a really famous person come stay, he would like make a signature dish and name it after them. Like,
yeah, so but more than one?
I don't know. Well, this one, it's because he gave her two dishes because one was when she was on a diet and one was when she wasn't.
Oh.
So if you've ever heard of Melba toast, it was actually named after Nellie Melba. I don't know that you can invent toast, but
But wait, is that kind of an insult to her? Because like calling someone human Melba toast is a big...
It is now, but yeah. At the time, it was just like, hey, I respect that you're on a diet. Here's the plainest thing I can give you.
Oh my God.
But when she was not on a diet, he made peaches Melba for her, which was an elaborate affair. So he would basically make peach sorbet, cover it in like a raspberry sauce, and then he would make one of those, like those cages that they make out of spun sugar in really fancy restaurants. He would do that, and then he would serve all of that in a swan sculpture carved from ice.
Wow.
Yeah.
He definitely
was all about
her.
the presentation.
That's elaborate. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That sounds good, actually.
It does. At the time, yeah, like to us now, we're like peaches and raspberry sauce. Like, what's the big deal? But at the time, it was like very exotic.
So the most interesting guest that I think the hotel has had during this time was Oscar Wilde. Obviously a famous writer, poet, playwright, novelist. And it was very well known. He was gay. And that was a part of...
If it wasn't well known, he certainly made sure it was well known after.
And it has to do with the scandal. It's not just like a fact we're throwing in. But basically, he would hang out at the hotel a lot. And
yes, so he was a client of D'Oyly before the hotel ever existed.
True, yeah.
He actually sent D'Oyly, like, set him up with a successful speaking tour throughout America. He would talk about the English Renaissance in art and interior design. And he actually kind of had this reputation of being like very smartly dressed and kind of flamboyant and he was very into aesthetics. Like it was art and beauty were very important core parts of his personality.
But he had a boyfriend at the time who this boyfriend happened to also be the boyfriend previously or the crush of D'Oyly's son.
Yes, D'Oyly's oldest son, Lucas, was a schoolmate of this guy. They went to Oxford together, and Lucas was actually deeply in love with him. And then his lover, Lord Alfred Douglas, better known to his friends as Bosie, meets Oscar Wilde, and drops his relationship with Lucas and is like all in on Oscar.
Yeah. It's so nice of him. But I mean, wouldn't you? You got Oscar Wilde or little Lucas. What are you going to go for?
I don't know. Like, Oscar Wilde was really witty and funny, but he also had kind of like a look that I would not have gone for.
Yeah, but you're looking at him as a woman.
True. Okay. I don't know how to look at him as a man. I've never experienced that.
And I'm sure, I mean, like, people didn't just, back then it wasn't even about how you looked, obviously.
Yeah.
It was like your status, and I think people were easily charmed. I think they were, life was hard, and if you had any kind of wit and humor and
it made life a little more bearable.
Yeah. They were like, whoa.
Yeah.
You're hot, you know? Like,
yeah, so Douglas and Oscar have a tempestuous affair, basically. Wilde, tried to be like he was not discreet, but apparently Douglas was not discreet at all. Was kind of pretty open about it. And he actually initiates Wilde into the underground of gay prostitution. There were boys known as rent boys who were basically working class male prostitutes.
very subtle.
Yeah, that they would like bring to the hotel and have parties with. Lord Alfred's father, who was the Marquess of Queensberry.
What's Queensberry, or where?
I guess that's like his title. I don't know where Queensberry
Oh,
is.
that's a title. I thought that was like a restaurant or something. Or like a competing hotel. The Queensberry.
No, it's his title.
Oh, okay. Forget it then. Continue.
So this guy sounds like any dad that you wouldn't necessarily want to have to come out to. He was kind of a jerk, didn't love that his son was
He didn't love the
flamboyantly
gays?
gay. That very rare exception to the rule Victorian father who doesn't love his gay son. So he and his son had a very contentious relationship because, Alfred was pretty open about his proclivities and his dad was like, no. So he confronted Wilde and Alfred like repeatedly about the nature of their relationship. And Wilde was always able to be like, no, you're misjudging. You're reading into things. Like, chill out. But apparently he even went to Oscar's house one time and kind of confronted him, basically, and said, if I see you with my son in public again, I'm going to beat the shit out of you.
Aye.
Yeah, so Oscar claims that he threatened to shoot the dad, but the dad claims that Oscar was like a coward, so who knows?
I feel like that's not Oscar Wilde's style to claim and shoot anyone, but to spread a rumor that he did.
Exactly. Yeah. So then in 1895, the Marquess again left his calling card at the club that Oscar was a member of. And on the card, it said, for Oscar Wilde, posing sodomite. Well, he meant it to say posing sodomite, but he misspelled it and put somdomite. So I feel
very
like
mad.
It's less of a burn if you don't know how to spell the word you're trying to insult someone with.
Yeah.
So that's not great. Alfred kind of riles Wilde up and convinces him that he should prosecute his father for libel.
Ooh.
And if he is found guilty of this, then he would have to be sentenced to like hard labor or something. But basically, since he wrote it on a note and left it for him, it was a public accusation that Wilde was committing sodomy. So he had a libel case against him. But that meant that Queensberry could only avoid conviction for this by demonstrating that what he said was in fact true. So this opens up a trial where it is to his benefit to prove that Oscar Wilde is in fact homosexual and is acting on it. So he hires a bunch of private detectives to find like evidence for this. So after the trial goes on for a while, they tell him, hey, we found the prostitutes and they're willing to testify. And so Oscar Wilde is like, oh, okay, I was just kidding and I would like to drop this now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so the Marquess is found not guilty, but now there's enough evidence to show that Wilde has been committing these crimes. And so he himself now gets charged and does end up going to prison for 2 years. He's has to do hard labor in prison for 2 years because of it.
Yeah, but a big part of them finding him guilty is some of the employees that worked at the hotel.
Yes.
And that's really what convinced whoever convicted him, or the judges, I guess, because they know how serious they take their jobs and they're very professional, and discretion is like of utmost importance. And if someone at the hotel says something happens, they're like, okay, it happened. And I guess one of the guys claimed that he went up and he saw him in bed with another guy. And then someone else also claimed that he had sex with him.
I think so, yeah.
So that was dumb on his part to go after this guy
really
and open
was.
that can of worms.
All of his friends were like, hey, don't do this. This is stupid. But never listen to the son feuding with their father. They're not going to give you sound advice. That's all emotion. But yeah, and actually Ritz, the manager of the Savoy, was very embarrassed that his employees actually testified against Wilde. He believed that they had basically failed one of their guests, and that because it was not their job to like put their noses in his business, and like he thought it was terrible that the employees had testified.
I kind of agree with him. Because
I do
what
too.
did they get out of it?
Yeah,
it's
especially like if they were testifying because of a murder, then sure, but
and also they look bad because if you go in front of the judge and say, "Yeah, I slept with him," now what do you look like?
Yeah,
that means you're guilty of being a sodomite also, and then no one's gonna want you or hire you or whatever.
So yeah.
During that time, this is wrong. Obviously.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
You have to work with the system at the time. So, but this ruins Oscar Wilde's reputation and life, basically.
Yeah, after he gets out of prison, he goes to France. He never comes to Ireland or Britain again, and he dies in Paris in 1900 at the Hotel D'Oyly. So,
he also ends up being poor and bankrupt.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, the whole, because he had to pay for the Marquess's legal fees since the Marquess was found not guilty, and that bankrupted him.
Oh, right. Wow. That man must have felt really good he won.
Oh my God.
But does he talk to his son? Right. Did he make peace with his son? I don't think
of course
so.
not. So yeah, that was a hollow victory.
But yeah, so Oscar Wilde, he doesn't do well, but he still wrote some stuff, right? He published.
Yes, he continued writing. Mm-hmm. I think that what he wrote after had a definite different tone to it than what he had written before. It got a little dark.
Right, that makes sense. I mean, the Portrait of Dorian Gray is pretty dark.
Yeah, but
it's like dark with a twist.
Yeah. And it was still like founded in all of that like beauty and youth, and whereas this, like what he wrote afterward was basically like about his spiritual journey through his trials and like the rhythms of prison life.
Oh God. Ew. He dies in a hotel in Paris, and it's alleged that he did die of meningitis, but we don't know if it was meningitis due from syphilis or from an injury he had from prison. And his son or a relative after he died was like, it's the injury, but a lot of people are like, it's syphilis from the prostitutes. And it could be both.
It could be both. It could be either. I would definitely not rule syphilis out. That was going around.
Yeah. But it's sad. It's sad either way. Poor Oscar Wilde. Didn't go out with a bang. Kind of like a lot of writers died really sad.
Yeah.
ways. But that was like one of the major scandals that was the hotel was involved, but that didn't exactly involve the hotel. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, like the hotel
next
was like the
scandals-
backdrop for what was going on.
It
but-
happened there, but another scandal that has to do with the hotel is that after D'Oyly searched all over the world and then poached the chef and the best chef around and the best manager around, they ended up being total assholes.
Yeah.
And
Like-
stealing from him, basically.
Yeah. And he like gave them unheard of salaries at the time, and they still stole. So one of the team members that Ritz insisted on bringing was the maitre d' of the hotel, Louis Echenard, and that was one of the people who was helping them steal and also was stealing himself. So they would take money, like they would take kickbacks from suppliers. They were stealing wine. They would like have food delivered to their houses instead of to the hotel. It amounted to being like, I think over like £1 million in today's money.
Oh, wow.
Is that
Yeah,
how much
they
it said?
did a lot of embezzlement.
Yeah,
They were, and that's what we know of.
Yeah, exactly.
Imagine-
That's only from how far back they checked the books,
Yeah.
because they didn't check it all the way. It wasn't until like in the end, D'Oyly even kind of put off checking on it until it was a problem that could not be ignored, and basically the investors in the hotel were like, "We have to look into this right away."
Yeah. That's really, it's just such a level of like ungratefulness.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what it was like to work at the hotel and all that
and
stuff.
it's
but
not like this was Ritz's only job. He also managed other places. He had a restaurant. He worked at other hotels because some guests would complain that he was not like at the Savoy enough, that he was neglecting his duties as manager there.
Oh.
So he was, and of course at the time, he and Escoffier were already working on opening their own hotel, the Ritz. So
they were ready to escape.
So I'm sure that's probably what they were using a lot
Yeah.
of that money for.
Yeah. So that was pretty heartbreaking, I think, for D'Oyly. Not just financially, but on a personal level.
Yeah.
Because he invested so much into them and he admired them so much. But as that happened, D'Oyly goes and he decides he's going to go and check out other properties to see if he could buy them and make them into hotels. And he ends up buying a boarding house near Hyde Park, and he transforms it into the Claridge's Hotel, which is another famous fancy hotel in London.
Yeah. This one was on a much smaller scale. He wanted it to be like cozy and quaint. And also it's in a neighborhood. And I think that the neighborhood was relieved that he was going to keep it small. Like they didn't want a gigantic Savoy kind of messing with their area.
But he still was a perfectionist about like how things should be managed.
Yeah.
And like all the fancy stuff. Due to failing health and things like that, I think his momentum dropped a little bit, because this was 1901.
Mm-hmm.
And he also had a fallout with Gilbert and Sullivan. They always had quarrels. They always had issues, but then there was like some big issue about the carpet.
Yeah. So D'Oyly replaced the carpet in the theater, and it was very expensive. And
Gilbert had the problem.
Yeah, Gilbert had the problem. And so D'Oyly owned the theater. And so Gilbert was like, "Hey, you own the theater. This should be a theater cost. Like this should be a cost that you have to handle. This should not be a cost that our production company handles. This is not costumes. This is not scripts or musicians. Like this is the theater. So you need to be paying for this, not us." And D'Oyly disagreed. And Sullivan was like, "D'Oyly's my best friend, so I guess I'll agree with him." And Gilbert was like, "You assholes."
Right. So that, I mean, it sounded like that was just the tip of the iceberg, that there was a lot more underneath, and that kind of broke.
Yeah. Well, years of tension at that
Yeah.
point, of them not always getting along.
Yeah. But then even after that happens, years pass, and they do reconcile, but it's still not the same.
Yeah.
And then Sullivan gets sick and passes away. And that really upsets D'Oyly. Like,
yeah, and D'Oyly at the time, his health is so bad that he couldn't go to the funeral. He had to just like watch what he could see of it out of his window.
right. And then eventually he does die in 1901.
Yeah, I think he has dropsy and like cardiac arrest.
What is dropsy?
It was a term used for many centuries to define a syndrome of fluid overload and signified the manifestations of the syndrome of congestive heart failure. Okay. So he had heart disease.
Yeah. And that ends part 1.
We will pick up in part 2 with his youngest son, Rupert, taking over. And we have a lot of good stuff to come. Like, you thought Oscar Wilde was a scandal? Oh, no.
There's a lot more scandals that are happening here. I mean, it is London.
And princes and murders and overdoses and all kinds of good stuff. Thanks for listening to Hotel History. You can follow us on most social media platforms, Patreon, and Substack by searching for Hotel History or Hotel History Podcast. If you like what you hear, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify so we can reach more listeners.